Alright, so I've installed a bunch of software. I've upgraded to Mavericks. It took several hours to do all of that. Quite a few number of reboots and updates involved in getting from the stock operating system that came with the machine to Mavericks and getting everything else installed as well. So here I am. I'm running a program called Carbon Copy Cloner. And what I'm doing is I'm cloning the hard drive onto the USB 3.0 drive that I have attached. Now this drive is a Western Digital My Passport Ultra, platinum color. I bought it refurbished, of course. I've had really good experiences with refurbished drives from Western Digital. In fact, I've had better experiences with refurbished drives from Western Digital than I have with their new drives. But they're an American company, and um, in the past I've found those drives to be overall the most reliable. And that's also the type of drive that I'll be putting in here shortly. In any case, so what I'm doing now is I'm just preparing the machine for me to switch out the drives and change the memory. So that'll be the next thing that we're going to be doing. But what I'm doing now is I'm just cloning the hard drive onto the external drive, which will allow me to boot up from the USB drive, which I'll need to do once I swap the drives out. So that's what I'm doing now, and I'll give you an update. I've probably got about 20-30 more minutes left. Overall, with the basic operating system files installed and a few other applications that I added, it should take up about 30 gigabytes, and that's about half an hour worth of cloning. So stay tuned. Okay, so here I am. I am ready to install the hard drive and the memory. I have cloned the drive to an external drive, and that way I can boot from the external drive and clone it back once I install the new drive. Very important point. Don't just pull out the drive and put in the new one, because you won't have an operating system. So now that I've done that, and of course you can do that if you have a bootable DVD, but I don't. So the tools that I'm going to need, I have a TT6. This is a TT6. And then I have a size 0 Phillips head screwdriver. And then I also have a couple of tools here that I'm going to use to pry the hard drive loose and do anything else that I need to do so that I can work gently once I'm inside the computer. The things that I'm going to install here are the memory. That's the memory. I have some real questions about how this is packed. This is not, at least it isn't obvious that this is an anti-static case. This is an anti-static case, so by comparison you see that it's gray in color. The reason it's gray in color is it actually has wires running through the plastic. The wires help to distribute the energy around the hard drive, and it forms what we call a Faraday cage. So when any sort of electrostatic discharge hits this, it is distributed around the device and actually forms more or less a force field that protects it from inside. It was named after Mike Faraday, who did an experiment where he built a cage and had someone raise him up into a lightning storm, and when the lightning hit the cage, he was protected inside because of the force field of energy that was formed around it. I think if it were myself doing the experiment, I probably would have said, and my lovely assistant will demonstrate the Faraday cage concept. Anyway, so we have memory, we have hard drive, we have a computer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the computer over. There are 10 screws on the bottom. 3 of those 10 screws are longer than the other ones, so we need to be sure we know where those are, and we need to be sure that we do not lose any screws. One of the things that I will probably do is I will probably put the screws in here. So that will help. In any case, stay tuned, and I'm going to pull the back off of the brand new laptop. All right, so one of the things that I've done here is I've opened the package of memory, being careful not to touch the memory inside. So I have not touched the memory at all. See all these metal pins here? Anytime your finger, your body makes contact with this, you're sending an electrical charge into some part of the memory, and it could burn out the transistor. So you don't want to do that. You want to stay well grounded. I'm living dangerously today because I do not have a wrist strap. I'll show you what you have to do to make sure that you don't ruin anything, even if you don't have a wrist strap. I'm on a relatively static-free surface here, so but again, I have not touched the memory yet. I popped the memory loose from using my finger from underneath on the other side of the plastic. Now I have removed the drive. I've touched it carefully on the edges. See all of these metal contacts here? Again, not a good idea to have your fingers touching any of that. I see a lot of videos where people are installing things and their hands are all over this, and it just is a bad idea. You might be able to get away with it 1,000 times and not have any consequence, but that one time really is all you need. So I have opened the memory, and I've opened this. I've laid it on top of the anti-static bag, and I've laid this here. That's because I don't want to be fumbling around with that once I get the case open. Part of that reason, too, is the fact that because I do not have a wrist strap, I'm going to have to try to maintain contact with the body of the laptop here as much as possible to equalize the potentiality between myself and the laptop. The other thing I'd like to avoid doing is I like to avoid moving more than I need to, because that generates static electricity, and needless to say, I'm probably not going to be rubbing a balloon on my head with the other hand either. So stay tuned. We'll get the back off of this, and I'll show you what that looks like inside. A couple of other things as I'm unscrewing this. There are 3 screws that are longer, and here is the location. Now notice I'm looking toward the back hinge. You can see the back hinge in black. These screws are longer, and those are the screws. The screw over here is a little bit shorter. I want to talk a little bit about how it is that I'm unscrewing this. The first thing I do is I want to steady it with one hand, and I don't have something to hold the camera, so I'm not able to really fully demonstrate that. But I'm over here, and I'm going to try to undo this screw. If I slip, I'm going to scratch the surface. So what I want to do is I want to get a really good contact. I want to figure out at what angle the screw is, and I want to make sure my hand is at exactly the same angle. I want to use the other hand to steady it, and I want to make sure I have a firm grip on the screw with the head of the screwdriver before I actually try to turn, because I don't want to slip the screwdriver, and I don't want to strip the head, and I also don't want to scratch the surface. So I'm going to do this very carefully. Now, in a lot of videos, you'll also see where people will use a magnetic screwdriver. This is an absolutely horrible idea. The reason is because the magnetic screwdriver contributes to the production of electrostatic discharge and can ruin your computer. So while it might be convenient to not lose the screw, it can have a catastrophic effect on your computer. And again, you might be able to get away with it a few hundred times, but that one time is all it takes. So do not use a magnetic tipped screwdriver. There are tools. I do not have mine with me right now, but there's a tool. It looks almost like a hypodermic needle, but when you press the top of it, it has 3 prongs that kind of come out like this, and it allows you to be able to grab things. And so that's a handy tool to have around if you have large hands and you have any trouble grabbing the screw. That's a nice tool to do it with, and you can do it in such a way that you're not using a magnetic screwdriver and contributing to the electrostatic discharge. So I'm going to take the rest of the screws off now. Stay tuned. All right, so here we are. I have removed 10 screws. I've placed them in a place where I can't lose them. You really don't want to lose a screw. So just be really careful with that. A lot of good computer toolkits come with sort of like a little bottle with a rubber stopper on the top. Almost looks like a test tube. And it's a good idea to make sure there's nothing else in it, and then put the screws in there. And remember where the long screws go, and then everyone else is a short screw. Here's the back of the panel. I removed that. I used this tool. It's just a really good idea because it's kind of on tight. That's one of the beauties of an Apple computer, is that it's put together very well. But that also means that once you get all the screws off, you're not out of the woods yet. You want to try to take that off without getting scratches on the body, and without also doing any damage to the computer. So this allowed me to just reach into the side and gently pry, and I was able to get the lid off. So there's the lid. You can see the ducts for the fan in the back. You can see a lot of other things there. And you can also see that this is brand new, right? So that's one of the things that they replace when they do a refurbished computer. You look at the inside of the computer, we have the battery. This is the battery here. And there's, of course, a tab there if you need to replace it. Now, this battery is brand new. I was able to verify that by looking at the computer settings, and it showed that the only cycles that had ever been on the battery were mine. And so that's another thing that you can do with an Apple computer that you can't really do with any other type of laptop, is you get lots of specific information about the battery. Now, speaking of the battery, there's one thing that I'm going to want to do. I'm going to want to remove this. See what I'm pointing to? That is the connector that goes from the battery to the motherboard and every other part of the motherboard. It would really suck if this computer tried to turn on as I was in the middle of changing memory or doing something else. So I've got to disconnect that. A lot of people forget to do that. Over here is the hard drive. This is the hard drive that I'm going to be replacing. You can see that there's a tab here. That tab is used to kind of pull it free. There's a brace that we're going to remove right here. There's 2 screws on the brace. I'm going to remove those 2 screws. Then I'm going to gently remove it from its place. Over here is the SATA and power connector. It's all basically wrapped into one. It's a lot cleaner than you see in regular PCs. And that is going to go here, where these wires are right here. So that's where my power and SATA connector is going to go. This is obviously going to go face down. There are a couple of screws both here and here, here, and here, that are on the drive itself. And the screws don't really attach to anything per se. They just kind of create something that protrudes from the drive. And that is what sits in these rubber grommets that are here. And again, this is another thing that's unique to the Apple computer. Normally, those would screw into some steel parts, and that's one of the reasons why other computers are a little bit louder than the Apple computer. But in any case, so these will just sit in rubber grommets. All I have to do is move the screws. Now, the screws are on this drive. You notice this drive, when you buy a drive, you don't get the screws. You have to use the one from your existing drive. Screws don't tend to wear out, so that's okay. Now, for the memory here, I'm going to basically push down, and it's going to pop up. So that's what I'm going to do there. You can see that there are notches on the memory there and here. That keeps me from putting the memory in incorrectly. If I look at how this memory is oriented, I get a good idea of how I'm going to put it in. And you can also see where the notch is. The notch is a little bit further to the right. Now, if we look at the rest of the board, we see the back of the board here. There are 2 fans, and then the ducts are on the back. The fact that this has an aluminum body allows it to cool a little bit easier. This is where your super drive is, essentially. And one of the things that a lot of people like to do is, since they don't use it, they'll pull this out and they'll buy a cover. And so, in other words, when you take your drive out, you can actually replace it and put it in here, and it ends up being like a second hard drive that's built into the computer. Me, on the other hand, I want to be able to burn DVDs, and just call me old school if you want to. That's one of the reasons I bought this computer, so I'm sure not going to be getting rid of that. Maybe someday I'll really start getting into writing Blu-rays, and then I'll buy an external, and then maybe what I'll do is I'll put another drive in here. But if I did put a drive, I'm not going to put a 500 gigabyte 5400 RPM drive. I'm probably going to lose my mind and put in a 1 terabyte fully solid state drive or something like that. Then I'll really have a machine. So that means that this little drive, sorry guy, but you are going to get a bullet in your pointy little head. You are going to eBay right away, and you're going right back into that little bag and all in, and into the packing equipment that I originally got with that hard drive. So I'm going to sell this on eBay. Any of you watching the video, look for me on eBay, TERREHULL, are the call letters. And in any case, I've got some work to do. I'll see you shortly. I want to re-emphasize this. The first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the power. That's right here. So I'm going to do that. Then I'm going to change out the memory. I'm going to change out the hard drive. And so I'll see you as soon as I'm done with all of that. All right, so now I've got the hard drive out and I have disconnected the power cable. There's the power cable right there. I've got the hard drive here in my hand. Again, I probably should not be touching that back there, but I'm trying to keep my fingers close to the spindle as I can. In any case, so here are some screws. These screws I'm going to take off and I'm going to put them on this drive. But in order to do that, I'm going to use a TT6 torque wrench. That's the thing that I had forgotten to mention. So I'm actually going to use this one over here to undo these screws. So as soon as I undo the screws, I will be back. Okay, now this is the new hard drive. It says slim on it. Woo-hoo. That's because it's only 7 millimeters tall and it is a 1 terabyte drive. This drive also incorporates somewhere in there a 16 gigabyte SSD. So it's basically 1 terabyte plus 16 gigabytes. So you can see all the specs right there. This is a Western Digital Black solid state hybrid drive. The Black series is the best series in the line. And in case I need to see this information later, I'm going to go ahead and take a picture of that. And then, of course, there's a couple of things that you can, a couple of QR codes. That's kind of curious. So if you want one, I guess you can scan that QR code and get your own. Now, this cost me 85 bucks. I just can't believe it. I mean, not much more than the price of just a regular hard drive, but this bad boy is going to scream. Now, I put the 4 screws on it. The other thing I did is I put that piece of tape, just like I said, I just took it off the other drive and put it on here. Now, I had mentioned that I was going to use a TT6. I thought that's what this was, but it was too small. This is basically in that kit, if you get it from Amazon, this is the one that you use. And so there it is. Now I'm going to plug it in, and I'm basically done with everything, so I'm going to put the cover back on. Alrighty then. See you in a minute. By the way, I just wanted to show you the little rubber grommets. So these are the rubber grommets. And I'm going to put the drive into these rubber grommets. So that protects the hard drive from a lot of vibration and such. And then these are the grommets on the other side. And then this bracket forms the other half of that circle, see? So I've attached the power connector. I'm going to put the rubber grommets in place. This part is going to be pressed down in there. And now, whoops, make sure my little tape job doesn't come off. Okay. And now, all I have to do is put that bracket on top and basically close it up. And we are rolling. Okay, we're back. I have installed the hard drive and connected it properly, replaced everything. I've also installed the memory. The other thing I've done is I've set the screws. So the 3 long screws go here in the right rear, as you know, when it's upside down like this, it's toward the back binder. That's where the fans are. So you've got 3 of those. And then the rest of these screws are normal screws. They're very small, so be very careful with them. Now, I haven't actually screwed them in. All I've done is I've set them in the place, so I need to screw them in. The other thing I've done is I've taken the hard drive that I've removed. Oh, by the way, don't forget to erase the hard drive before you move it, because you probably want to sell it. And in order to do that, you probably want to erase it using a security option where you write zeros to each of the bytes. So that's what I've done with this. This bad boy is ready to go. I don't have any personal information on it. I can sell that on eBay, try to recoup some money. So actually all of the amazing discounts that I've been talking about, it's probably going to be even more because I'm going to end up getting some money for this. I'll probably get $100 or $200 for both the memory and the hard drive. Now I've taken the memory out as well, and I've placed the memory in the package that I got the other memory in. So that'll all be ready to send out. I don't even need to buy packing materials. If I sell it on eBay, I'll just use the original packing materials that I got when I bought the memory. So here's all of that. I'm going to screw this thing back on, and then we'll try to boot it up and see what happens. Okay, so I've screwed the computer back together. One of the things that I noticed, remember I told you about the power cable. It's a bit of a trick to get it back on. So whatever you do, don't try to force it, because if you bend a pin, game is over. So then the other thing I did is I plugged it in just now, and as soon as I plugged it in, it just started booting. So I scrambled around to plug in my USB drive, and as you can see, it just naturally booted from the USB drive without being told anything else, because there is no operating system on the internal drive. So now I'm going to have to boot up onto this. I'm going to clone back to the existing drive. So that's what I'm going to work on now.